Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Phoenix Backups podcast. Today, I have a very special guest, Raj Shroff from Toronto, Canada. And Raj is an AI expert. He's a consultant and educator. He has a robust background in integrating AI into business strategies across various industries. He's currently the director of applied AI research in Blue Artificial Intelligence and a university lecturer with experience in finance, big data, and AI education. Welcome, Raj. How are you doing today?
Hey, Steve, thank you, and it's great to be here. I'm looking forward to this conversation.
Yeah, same. So, Raj, I probably stole a little bit of the thunder, but why don't you go ahead and tell us about yourself a little bit in your own words?
Yeah, thanks for the generous introduction. So, yeah, my day job is in consulting, specialized in artificial intelligence for enterprises. So that's really three parts. First, we generally start with executive education, corporate education. That really leads into the classical management consulting related to AI strategy. How do you integrate AI into an already existing business strategy without reinventing the wheel? And that leads quite nicely to project implementation. So either we work with clients on prototyping, building specific solutions, or even being part of their larger internal and external vendor team to deliver like a full portfolio. So that's kind of what I do in for a day job. After that, I do teach at universities. I do a bunch of public speaking, really around AI, emerging tech, and yeah, that's me in a nutshell.
It's very nice. So, as Raj kind of hinted, our theme today is going to be the convergence of AI and cybersecurity. So, first off, let's talk about how those two really start to intersect and complement each other. What would you think is the biggest role of AI in cybersecurity?
Well, before we really get to that question, might want to we can take a step back and just think about what is AI, like what is machine learning. So, at a definitional level, like machine learning takes a learning algorithm and feeds it data. And from that data, the algorithm learns how to find patterns, how to predict outcomes, and even how to repeat decisions at scale, to make repeated decisions at scale. So when you think about a Netflix, that's like looking at your viewing habits, the viewing habits of people similar to you, and recommending content to you. That's essentially machine learning in action. It's happening over and over again. There's an algorithm that's learning from data in the background to give you a recommendation. Now, in a cybersecurity context, it's very, very similar. But the term here that is very popular is machine learning is used to detect anomalies, so anomaly detection. So in this context, the machine learning algo or model can identify unusual behavior between networks and systems because it has learned from past network data that it's been trained on to say, okay, this is normal network activity. Companies internally making certain requests, and the network's operating as normal. Because it knows what normal looks like, the model can then flag potential security breaches by recognizing a deviation from a normal. It could say, okay, this could be an intrusion. I'm just going to forward this incident report to the cybersecurity team, and they can kind of investigate further. Now, what kind of algorithms are involved? Many, many, many types of algorithms. There's many companies doing this. They're using things as simple classification algorithms like k-nearest neighbors, or they could be using more complex neural networks like autoencoders. Not going to go into all of that, but that's generally how it all is packaged together in like cybersecurity software. A good example of this actually is in financial services. So within JP Morgan Chase, their internal research team, they actually ended up using deep learning to say, we're going to build an early warning system that detects malware, Trojan horses, and phishing campaigns that are in progress. Somebody's clicked on a malicious link, the application's doing something, it's kind of trying to detect that activity. And the reason like AI works really well here is that according to research, it takes about, or it used to take about 100 days for a Trojan to completely compromise a company network, depending on size and everything else. So if you have an early detection system or an early warning system, you actually get warned like weeks or maybe months in advance. And that could really be a game changer instead of finding out after the fact that you've been compromised.
So, what do you think about AI becoming a standard in the cybersecurity field as far as not only detecting threats but being able to execute actions to mitigate those threats?
Yeah, so that's probably what the way the industry is moving towards. And there's quite a few companies that have real-time threat detection, triage, and response systems in place. A couple of the companies are like Darktrace. I like them because they have a cool name. Um, CrowdStrike, and I feel bad about bringing up CrowdStrike because of what they've been through in the news lately, uh, causing a global IT outage. But they do have pretty good endpoint security systems that can kind of detect when a node that's connected to a network could be a laptop, computer, server, if that node is compromised and what to do after that. Like what systems do you lock down? Um, what kind of actions do you take to kind of respond to the threat? Like who do you send alerts to? So Darktrace does it, CrowdStrike does it, IBM has their own software that does it. Google, Microsoft, all the big guys have some kind of solution for this kind of thing to respond to a threat, um, in addition to detecting a threat. So a lot of the big IT providers, they work with maybe specialized vendors and bring in their kind of software. So CrowdStrike, hilariously enough, was the preferred vendor to Microsoft Windows. Say, hey, you got to provide us this cybersecurity software, and that went wrong for many reasons. Um,
Well,
but you
let's
bring up a,
second. And I'm sorry for interrupting, but let's talk about that for a second because CrowdStrike, and I'm not going to say anything bad about them. I mean, it. Everybody makes mistakes. It happens. We're going to move on. We beat those mistakes, down through our past episodes. But from what I understand with CrowdStrike, there's well, let me rephrase this. There's two ways, that of my understanding that they can do that. Any company can really do these AI detections, and it's either going to be an agent that's going to connect to a piece of hardware, whether it's a desktop, laptop, whatever, or it's something that's built into next gen firewalls, where they're coming in and using AI to say, okay, this looks like something. What do you want to do? Now, if we were to let AI make the whole decision, do you think something like the CrowdStrike outage could happen again?
yeah, I mean, the way I think about this in the best case scenario is the Terminator movies um, where Arnold Schwarzenegger's character was sent in to like fight literally the Terminators and save John Connor, Sarah Connor, and all of that. So that's kind of what I pictured this thing looking like, where it's given, where AI agents really, not just one agent, but multiple agents, are given autonomy on how to deal with the threats, like um, how to like shut certain things down or figure out what to do. Um, but then from an enterprise standpoint, I think people, at least at the leadership level, they say, okay, this is fine in theory, but I kind of want our team to have the ultimate control here. So the way I see this in terms of implementation, like um, what are like CTOs going to be comfortable with? What are like IT heads going to be comfortable with? They're going to say, okay, we would rather the agent like collects information and sends us a recommendation for a certain action to take. And we end up executing it unless the action is so basic and so it's so common sense that the agent can go do it itself. So that's kind of where I see it going. So even if it's possible to have autonomous AI agents built into firewalls to respond to threats, I almost get the feeling, based on working on so many IT projects, that you'll need some human being hitting the approve button somewhere. That's just because that's human nature. Like we don't want to give up autonomy at a fundamental level, and if any company bureaucracy, they kind of want that power in their hand just to say we can hold somebody accountable.
Yeah, no, I agree. I'm thinking though, like you said, for basic common sense actions. Okay, someone's DDoSing
Yeah.
the network. Okay, well then the AI can throw in firewall rules to prevent that. But going into something that's a lot more complex should definitely be in the hands of a security team.
Yeah, I mean, the way I kind of see it progressing, if you look really into the future, you kind of have these next gen like security operation centers. Like if you picture like any like military installation where you have these like um, these like nerve centers of like decision making. Here you can essentially have the AI agents handle the bulk of threat detection, assessment, and routine response, like you said during a DDoS. But here you still have the human cybersecurity teams. They're focusing really on strategic oversight and high impact decision making. And the AI handles more repetitive, time sensitive tasks, but you don't want to wake somebody up and say, hey, what do we do here? But the team behind it saying they're doing the really high leverage kind of stuff.
Yeah, and the other thing, like you said, we don't want to be waking people up at 3 o'clock in the morning because of something simple. So let that handle it. But where do you think, because you also mentioned about, relinquishing control and having leadership have, someone that they could say, okay, well, this person was in charge of this, something happens, this person should have dealt with it the right way. But what happens when that person takes the recommendation of the AI and implements it and it's the wrong thing to do?
Yeah, so that's really going into the area of governance and like having operating procedures. Like none of this is like very glamorous stuff, but then this is where like a lot of simulations come. Like how do you deal with some certain situations? Like if you get a recommendation from a model, like what are the steps process to kind of execute that recommendation or assess that recommendation? Um, every organization kind of has like a different approach to all this, and one of my favorite examples of this, like in terms of simulating failures and kind of figuring out how to respond to it, because that really gives you an opportunity to write the governance manual for that kind of event. So my favorite example is actually from like 2015, like well before all this like AI led threat detection stuff, where Netflix were saying, you know what, we just are going to um, simulate our data centers failing and figure out what we're going to do in that situation. And there's like people are like, why are you doing this? Just like have robust like disaster recovery systems in place. They're like, no, we're going to like force the issue. We're going to like simulate one of our production systems failing, and how do we kind of get back up and maintain the uptime? And it worked really well for them in the end because a couple of years later, one of their AWS servers went down. I think US One East or something, and everybody else was like affected, saying, "Oh my gosh, we're offline." But these guys were up and running pretty quickly. So, I mean, to go back to your point, like, how do you kind of deal with a situation where somebody takes a recommendation from an AI and it's a wrong recommendation? The only way around this is to simulate so many outcomes where the person kind of acting on the recommendation knows kind of what could go wrong. So they're taking an informed decision at the end of the day. Can't stop everything from going wrong. Ask CrowdStrike, but but we can plan as much as we can.
Okay, so we're going to continue beating that dead horse. This episode is sponsored by CrowdStrike. Raf, edit that out. Um, okay, so on to our next point. Going more into, because you mentioned disaster recovery and backups. AI definitely has a role in that as well. And one of the first steps of understanding what you need to back up, and also in disaster recovery, is okay. What is your critical data? And you know, I have talked to a lot of business owners, technical and otherwise, and all of them say the same thing, and their answer is, "Oh, their customer data."
Mhm.
And the answer to that is wrong. Unless you are a company of 1 to 5 people, then you're okay. You're right. But you get beyond 5 people, right? And these people are uh, waiting, are relying on you to pay them, and you have a payroll department and all that. All your staff data, all your employee data is your critical data. Your first set of data you need to restore because, first of all, if they don't have access to anything, you're not ever coming back up.
Oh yeah.
So, you're restoring things like your domain controllers, you're restoring things like your file servers, you're restoring things like anything that's got, employee data on it, because at the end of the, people still need to pay rent. Um, so to make sure that they're getting paid and that everything that they need to get paid to submit to whatever payroll service they have is going up there, and they're able to do that. So, but a lot of people think, oh no, it's my customer data because without my customers, I have no business. And while that's true, but you also have no business if you don't have employees. So I'm thinking that AI needs to be able to differentiate what is the true critical data that a company needs to back up first. And if we're going to rely on AI to do that, well, why don't we take that a step further and say, okay, AI, you have identified this, set a backup, put it as an immutable repository, put it somewhere that we can't delete it for at least 3 years
Mhm.
and whatnot, and go on. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, so that's a great point to bring up. Like, how do you identify the correct data? And it's it's very tempting to say, okay, let the AI go and do it. But I would actually take it back a step further and say it's up to the staff at any given company to go ahead and initially label the data that they find to be highest priority or more important. And the machine learning model, it learns from that labeled data. So that's part of its training data. Is that's okay. Our payroll data has a priority one, customer data has priority two, and so on and so on. So then, after the model has learned what is important data, it can really go into all of these different servers and data repositories and virtual machines. Like a lot of organizations spin up endless number of virtual machines. They don't they yeah, there you go. They forget like what's on there. They don't know what's important and what's not. So if you have this kind of AI model like going through all these systems, saying this is important data and this is why it's important, it kind of ends up saving a massive amount of time because backing up data takes up space, takes up time. And then you want to avoid like backing up data you don't need to, like duplicated data, data that's not attached to records, old data that's already backed up in long-term storage that you don't need to back up weekly. And I think AI can really kind of go a step further and say, kind of prioritize when certain types of data should be backed up. Is something important enough to be backed up during the weekly full data backup, or is something better to be backed up incrementally? So every weekday between the full backups, this new bit of data that's like operationally important, let's say related to a new customer transaction, that needs to be backed up at a higher priority for incremental backups, but not the full backups. So a lot of things to do. And then ultimately, if you look at any of these like AI workflows, they're they can be trained over time. So a lot of these robotic process automation companies that build in AI into the workflows, like UiPath, Automation Anywhere, and so on, they actually have this feature where once they kind of build a model that's going on and doing something daily or weekly, you can always have the staff look at the results and say, okay, that was wrong. Update your instruction to do this instead. And the model can kind of learn over time. So really this combination of having the staff assist with training the model and then giving the model feedback, that might be the most robust way going forward. Because like, if you run an organization, your data priorities change. Like something is important today, not that important tomorrow. So you got to kind of teach the AI over time.
And I'm glad you brought up a specific topic, and that was not, is not duplicating data that
Mm.
data be backed up. And I think that training that AI model, that language model, to go in and to identify, because as you said, there are companies of bazillions of virtual machines, and they've got the 3 virtual machines doing the same thing, but they just forgot that this machine was doing it, so we spun up something else. or we needed to add on a service or something to that other VM, or something that other VM is running, but they're still accessing the same data. So making sure that we're not duplicating data is a very important thing in backups because, like you said, it takes up space. But the other part of it is that the more you're backing up, the bigger of a chance you're backing up something that's infected. So if you're constantly backing up the same data that lives in 3 spots or 4 spots or 5 spots or 6 spots, well, okay, what happens if that sixth virtual machine, has malware? Well, now you're introducing that into the backup set. And, AI is great, but there's no such thing as 100% detection. There's companies out there that offer 99%, and I kind of chuckle at that. But, um, there's lots of there's lots of room in there for mistakes and stuff like that. So I think it's a great thing that the AI can go in and say, okay, well, you know what? I've got the same exact data in 6 different spots. Let me go here first. And then, like you said, incrementally, if there's something else that's changed on any of those, we can, we can incorporate it. So, and I think that also brings us into a disaster recovery area as well. Because backups, the only reason why you're having backups is A, if you make a mistake, or if something that's catastrophic has now happened and you have to restore. AI, being able to be able to make these restores, bring some of that critical infrastructure back up before a human even has to get involved, I think is a good thing. Now, what do you think is like the future of that? Do you think that's something that's going to be implemented, or do you think that's always going to be part of a team that's always going to be doing that first, and then the AI will just monitor it?
Yeah, I mean, when it comes to like recovering from disaster, I mean, I like to make this distinction between backup and disaster recovery. So backups, like as it was explained to me by like many like IT professionals that I work with, backups generally static. You have to like manually spin up the backups. But like with when you're preparing for disaster recovery, disaster planning, you're constantly streaming your operational data to a second site. You're saying, okay, if something happens to the first site, whether it's an earthquake, hurricane, flood, war, CrowdStrike, doesn't matter. You're immediately able to like spin up site B, saying, "Okay, we are up and running." Sure, we're in airports. Our servers went down. We don't have to resort to handwriting boarding passes and manually directing people to gates. We have this other system up and running. We're ready to go. In terms of like how that could work in the future, could AI take it over? Is there still a human component? It's for the foreseeable future probably a hybrid approach, because when it comes to recovering from a disaster, like those systems can be up and running immediately. But even there's like some amount of data loss. It's possible. Like your recovery systems could in themselves go down. So it's essentially you got to train your people to say, okay, how do you respond in this situation? What is the playbooks? What's the manual? And how can you leverage whatever AI tools you have to like immediately um, spin something up automatically? But then what can you also go in and kind of say, okay, this is what we need to do to get up to 100% operational instead of just the 90%.
Yeah, well, I'm going to piggyback off of you. So, disaster recovery, in my experience, is not only okay, earthquake, flood, hurricane, missile strike, you know, the wrong person getting elected president. None of that. Sometimes a disaster is just, you have a disgruntled employee that is about to get fired.
Mm.
They go in and they try to take down your infrastructure. Now, if this is a network administrator or senior network administrator, your chief technology officer, chief security officer, whichever, they can cause some damage. And
Mm.
I think that AI can say, okay, well, we've detected this has gone down. No one's told us this is supposed to go down, so I'm going to bring it back up. And then if the data is missing, I'm going to just initiate a restore right now to bring it back up. And I think that the AI can react faster than any human can in those kinds of areas.
Yeah, I mean, I love that example. It's a very concrete example of like a human causing something that's unplanned. And again, just to go back to the another point we talked about, this is where like simulations come in to be very helpful. So you can have you can actually have like an AI agent like run these simulations for you, like what would happen in situation A versus situation B, and so on. So in this way, like not only can the AI get the whole thing up and running immediately and quickly, it's um, it's the staff also kind of knows exactly what's going on in the situation, and they can kind of work hand in hand, and nobody's caught by surprise. But I love the fact that you brought up this brought up like a disgruntled employee like taking down a system.
Well, it was, I mean, so from a personal standpoint, one of my first jobs when I worked as a help desk tech and help desk supervisor, when they had let me go, they were so afraid that I had so many backdoors into the system and that I was going to do something.
Mhm.
I had a private server that lived. I think it was a desktop computer, but it
Yeah.
turned into a server, and it was just set there to be a network monitor. That's all it was there for.
Mhm.
And they thought that I would be able to use that to get in. So they immediately tried to, they pulled the plug on everything. They had a whole security team go in there and make sure that every one of my accesses were, revoked and all that. And now, well, now we don't need people to do that because now we can tell an AI we're letting this person go. So now shut down their access or shut down their access at this point in the day. And I think that that's an amazing tool. And my personal thoughts on AI is, as long as they work in tandem with humans,
Mhm.
then we're good. But I'm also very skeptical of handing over too much control to them.
Yeah.
You know, so and I think that kind of seems to be the theme of everything that we're talking about is that there needs to be teamwork, whether it's human to human teamwork or human to AI teamwork.
Mhm.
It's extremely important. And we're the ones that's going to train the AI. So the AI is not going to just learn by itself.
Yeah.
So now we've really got to think about, okay, well, when we're training the AI to do things for us, we got to make sure that they're compliant in best practices and all that, and up to date on all that. Because if we teach them our shortcuts, well, then our shortcuts can make mistakes, and now we've got problems. But if we do like a step one flow, workflow of how things are supposed to go, then I think AI would be very, very useful in that area as well. And outside of a disgruntled employee, I mean, you have what happens if wherever you're at loses power and your backup batteries are down and all that stuff. Can the AI know that this is happening? Get an alert from the backup batteries. Hey, we're on backup power. Let's switch everything, all of our data, over to Site B
Yep.
to make sure that we have continuity of business. And I think that that's also a very important thing to be able to hand that control over. I think things that need to be handled quickly,
Mhm.
more faster than a human can react,
Mhm.
should be handed over to AI. But as long as those are simple tasks, flipping a switch, setting data set A over to server B, and doing that. And I think that you would agree with me on that too, right?
100%. I mean, I tell all my clients and all my students at the same time is that at the end of the day, AI is just a tool that you use to achieve a certain objective. It's up to you to decide what that objective is. Do you want to automate the low hanging fruit? Do you want to give it full autonomy over your systems? But when we talk to enterprises, they say it's fine that the AI gives us a recommendation or does like a basic action, but we want the ultimate authority to have that undo button to kind of say to kind of override what has happened or what is about to happen. Um, and this is really rooted in good corporate governance instead of just the classical risk aversion that maybe the media says, okay, the people are not embracing AI because they don't trust it, they don't like taking risks. But it's actually, if you think about it, rooted in like good standard corporate governance where they say, um, look, ultimately, somebody at the firm should be accountable for that action, and that matters more than everything else.
Now, I'm just curious because you are a teacher of AI, and that's also your industry. About when do you think that AI was really started to be introduced into the workforce?
I mean, I started my career in 2011. Um, Lucky enough to have missed most of the global financial crisis and just ended up graduating at the right time. So really, when I was working, because my background is I worked in an insurance company out in Hong Kong. It was a French insurance company. So we were sitting in the regional Asian office. But I wasn't selling frontline insurance. I was in the IT projects digital transformation team. So we were rolling out IT upgrades, digitizing paper-based workflows, really getting customer intelligence through like data collection, not just in Hong Kong where I was sitting, but all of our Southeast Asian offices. So back then, it was still really going from old school paper-based in-person ways of working to like actually capturing data digitally, making kind of data-driven decisions based on um, digital systems where you can have a single view of a customer, multiple departments can share the same kind of information. Um, at that point, I'd like to say 2011 to say 2015, we were hearing about AI being used really in like financial services, banking, investments, because a lot of that was in-house AI for like investment decision making, deciding on whether to give a loan to someone or not. But in the wider corporate world, they were still going through their digital transformation journeys. That kind of changed in about 2018, 2019, because when we saw a shift where they said, okay, we have all this data and digital systems, we're doing these we're making decisions based on um, business intelligence systems because we have the data in place. So that really set the groundwork for implementing machine learning because you need that critical mass of data that's labeled, organized in like a proper like data warehouse, and you're good to go. So around that time, we started to see this rising narrative over, hey, we can integrate machine learning into decisioning, not just for cybersecurity, but for operational decisions. So that's kind of how our firm got started up, saying because now there's a demand for these kind of services.
Okay. That's very informative because I was curious about when those AI really started getting in there. What are your thoughts on AI platforms such as like ChatGPT, Microsoft Copilot, and all that? What are your thoughts on those?
Yeah, so when we come to enterprise uses of AI platforms, and I think I'll focus on the enterprise part because personally I love it. Like I actually run a lot of these large language models open source locally on my system. So I kind of can tweak the models and get them to perform how I want to. But enterprises, they're like, can we use ChatGPT? No, because they don't want to have they don't want their employees to kind of share their data externally or upload their data anywhere. And I know like OpenAI has an enterprise level of ChatGPT, but it's maybe not as customizable. There's a certain learning curve there. You gotta essentially fine tune or train the model to kind of work with your organizational data. But what I'm seeing a lot of enterprises do is that they're just spinning up Microsoft Copilot because they've used Microsoft Office in the organization. Their employees know how to use it. And Copilot, which is this large language model essentially, and with other generative AI models, it's integrated into Word, Excel, Outlook. It can read through Slack messages like Teams and everything. So it works. It can kind of read through your email, summarize the salient points, and help you generate an email. It can take a Word document, generate PowerPoint presentation. It can help you look up organizational data within company systems. So it's great for productivity, but I always like to think about what could go wrong. And to that point, they hosted the Black Hat Cybersecurity Conference in Vegas recently. And a bunch of red teamers, they actually said, okay, let's figure out how we can kind of compromise Copilot. And they did. And what they ended up doing was they said once an attacker has access to somebody's corporate email, they can deploy Copilot to essentially automate a spear phishing campaign. They just say, write this email, write like 20 emails in my writing style based on what's in my inbox to the people I regularly contact and say, and attach a malicious link, and they click on it, or they a malicious document, they click on it, and I get to deploy this script throughout the company systems. To take that a step further, if I already have access to the systems, I can say, let me inject a prompt, inject some like bad data into a prompt that extracts the salary information of people at the firm and sends it to me, or tricks the company's chatbot to give me like a 99% discount. So a lot of these theoretical hacks and breaches have already been kind of demonstrated. But the key point here is, until now, you still need pre-existing access into a company system. But the wider point here is that if you can get some employee to open a file that has malicious data encoded into it, and you can use that to prompt the internal Copilot system, that opens up a can of worms that people haven't really figured out how to deal with or avoid. And when people ask me, like, what do you do? How do you prepare for that? I'm just like, it's a great idea to test generative AI tools within the enterprise in isolated use cases where the cost of making mistakes is not that high. Do you want to hook everything up to your company email, document repositories? Maybe not initially, but if you want to start with like a sandbox environment to say, does this work? And then roll it out to a larger use case, a larger team, then you're maybe better prepared to deal with anything that could go wrong.
Well, for our viewers out there who may not understand some of the technical terms, how would you describe a sandbox environment?
Yeah, so sandbox environment, it's used mainly in a regulatory context, but any firm can apply it. It's this like closed off environment where you can deploy a certain program or an app or a certain process, but whatever happens within that environment, like let's say within a few machines or servers, it doesn't have any impact on what happens within the wider organization. So it's almost like a little playground, like a literal sandbox that we played in as kids, that anything that happens within that little sandbox, you can build a sandcastle, you can throw sand at your friends. Anyone outside the sandbox is not really affected by it.
Thank you. So, that you brought up a very good a talking point, which was about the security of AI itself, because people can make attacks on the AI. One of them, as you mentioned, was a phishing campaign. And I think that latches right onto social engineering, right?
Mm.
Because companies should be training their staff, and we've talked about this in a previous episode, really training their staff about what is social engineering, types of social engineering attacks, including phishing and all that. How to There's no 100% way to avoid it unless you're just not on the internet and accepting email. Um, but how what are the things to look for? And if we put so much trust into AI where we're not thinking about that, because now we're just looking at it from human to human and not automated to human,
Yeah.
AI to human. I think that's going to become a big issue. But your thoughts, like, how do you think that people should respond to, besides testing things out in a development environment or sandbox environment?
Mhm.
What do you think uh, people would really, security officers, technology officers, or whatnot, how they should be responding to, attacks against the AI?
Yeah, I mean, you bring up a great point with social engineering, where you're essentially trying to compromise an individual to do something for you instead of just writing the perfect malware to like get in and infiltrate the company's systems. Movies love to have this like shadowy supercoder that's writing the perfect program to like break into any system. But like, what happens in the real world is that you just have to find one guy, one person within the company that clicks on the wrong link, or you can convince that person to do something for you. And the best way to illustrate this with like what happens when you throw generative AI into the mix is like a story that came out of Hong Kong earlier this year. So there's this like British company in Hong Kong. Um, their One of their members of their finance team was contacted by a senior executive saying we have to wire like $25 million to this offshore account. It's like this operational secrecy. It's like this top secret deal we're doing. So we need you to do this. And clearly, the staff member who has not been named, thankfully for him, is was saying, "Hey, this makes no sense." He said, "So the CFO said, you know what? Let's hop in on a Zoom call, not just you and me, but like our broader like senior executive team." So they did the Zoom call. The employee was given instruction on how to wire the money and said this has to be done time sensitive. It's like very urgent. Don't tell people because they're not clear to know. Non-disclosure agreement, so on and so on. So the employee went ahead and did this. But it turned out that all of those people that appeared on the Zoom call were deepfakes. So pictures generated, pictures and video generated because all these people were public figures anyway. You just have a bunch of their photos. You know what their voice sounds like. Use like literally, you can use any generative AI voice software to kind of spoof this in real time. So I could be talking with a script, or I could provide my generated avatar with a script, and it speaks in that person's voice. So this guy got duped, and this was big news because like Hong Kong is like a global financial center. Happens there, can happen anywhere. This employee asked the right questions, but what do you do? What do you kind of do to avoid this? And there's very little that exists in terms of a playbook other than saying, you know what, you got to make people aware that this is possible. And if you get a request that just sounds out of the blue or wrong in some way, take a step back and actually go talk to a real person face to face. In the old days, I would have said call them on the phone, but now you can spoof that as well. So talk to people face to face. Yeah, and talk to as many people as possible. You literally could go up to the CEO's office, knock on the door and say, "What do I do here?" So, ironically, like in this age of AI-driven scams, essentially, the probably the best way to stop this is to number one, be aware of it, and that's what a lot of our staff training is geared to, making people aware of what AI is capable of, but then also slowing down, doing things more inefficiently, getting many people to sign on that dotted approval line, because any kind of threat actor or scammer, they want you to move quickly. They don't want you to think. So if anybody's asking you to move quickly, maybe the best part is to
slow down.
Move quickly. Yeah.
Yeah, I had to learn that lesson. And it's difficult for me to say this as an IT professional, but in one of my past job positions, there was I had a lot going on at once, and they were doing a cybersecurity training as well while all this other stuff was going on. And I glanced at an email real quick, and it said, hey, this is so and so. Hey, I need you to click here and whatever. And I'm not even thinking, because now I'm thinking about the 20 other tasks I've got on my plate that have to get done in the next 10 minutes. And I clicked on the link, and luckily, like I said, it was just the training, that the phishing training and the spear training, and and it came up saying, hey, this, and it reported to my manager and all that. So I spoke to my manager about it. He goes, don't worry about it. Just don't do it again. Next time we do it, we'll let this go as an accident. You know, but from then on out, I learned to slow down. And I think that that's also a big thing. We have a fast-paced world, and people expect things to be done 1, 2, 3. Whether it's customers, whether it's the public, whether it's internal with just other employees or leadership or whatever. And the thing that we need to understand is that unless we're putting a man on the moon or we're performing some sort of life-saving surgery, we can slow down just a little bit.
Yeah, I think that those are wise words, and honestly, everybody should just think about what they do before they do it. It's hard to do because it can happen to anyone, and like I look at an email the moment I wake up, my brain's not on full alert yet, but like maybe just take time to read something twice to see it doesn't make sense.
Or don't read your email first and you get up.
That's even better advice. Like I should take
that. Yeah, because I used to do that too. And what I would do is, I've been in plenty of positions where I've been on call 24/7. So I check my phone. If I saw an email, like, all right, but unless I saw something that had like the urgent thing on it, that from alerting platforms that we had, I'm like, all right, that's going to wait until after breakfast and after I've, warmed up a little bit.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, there's definitely that component. So we've talked about a lot of we talked about some good things on AI. We touched on how that can be abused. But let's talk about some case studies on how AI has been used in positive results. Like let's talk about how AI really can help create a backup strategy and a disaster recovery strategy, and even help us test it. What do you?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, when it comes to like backup strategy, disaster strategy, we've touched on a few things like how AI can kind of identify what is important. When it comes to preparing for a disaster, that scenario analysis, I briefly mentioned the Netflix doing that by simulating crashes of like their data centers and their servers. So they actually call this chaos engineering. And I'll explain it and then kind of talk about how AI could be used here as a case, and maybe go into some other stuff. But like, so within their chaos engineering strategy, they intentionally disrupted part of their production infrastructure, or at least simulated it, and just to test the resilience of their systems. Um, so they're doing this with or without AI, but when it comes to implementing machine learning into this process, you can have the models analyze the result of disruptions that you've caused so that it can predict future potential points of failure. So if the load on a certain system is at a certain level, are the odds of that system going down increased or are they the same? And it's looking at dozens, if not hundreds, of variables at the same time. It's kind of trying to predict what could go wrong in which place. Um, just to kind of look at it a bit further, when we think about preparing for disasters, it's often not just one system or one tool that you're using. It's a suite of services, and this even goes well beyond cybersecurity. I mean, some examples is like any company involved in like supply chain, exposed to supply chain risks, exposed to extreme weather if you have to transport goods or provide services on the ground. They're actually relying on third-party vendors that are using AI product and services to kind of predict these like outlier events. There's a Canadian firm called Blue Dot, and they use really streaming global data from news, um, social media, and other places to kind of predict disruptions to supply chains and even like predict the emergence of infectious diseases that could spread very quickly and impact supply chains. This company is pretty cool because they were one of the first companies to predict the emergence of COVID-19 in Southeast Asia, and they managed to kind of track how the disease would spread within the region across countries. So their clients, they had kind of an early warning system on, hey, which of our manufacturing centers could essentially be locked down. So that's great intelligence to have. It's kind of preparing them. Another example in terms of extreme weather events is Google's DeepMind, their DeepMind unit. They've kind of demonstrated or maybe even launched a tool last year. They called it GraphCast, where it's essentially an AI model that can predict 10-day weather events with a much higher degree of accuracy than current weather systems. Um, in in Toronto, it said it was going to rain yesterday. It did not rain. So you can't even trust a one-day weather forecast these days. But GraphCast, it actually goes a step further by offering like early warning systems for extreme events like cyclones, and it can identify areas that are most likely going to be associated with flood risk, or the predicts the onset of like extremely hot cold temperatures, which literally can cause cars to break down if you're in like Russia or somewhere, or hey, even in Canada, because trucks don't work when it gets to a certain temperature. So then it just gives you and kind of this advanced warning to say, okay, something might go wrong. AI has kind of given me this insight. Now it's up to me to decide as like this as a person in charge of this operational area. What do I do with that information? Do I make sure that I have staff on standby? Do I kind of say, okay, we got to spin up these backup systems because something might go wrong? Or do I need to get on the phone with our global supply chain team and say, hey, prepare for this kind of supply chain breakdown because this area is flooded and that's where all of our materials go through?
And thinking of that because I'm agreeing with you 100% on all of that. You brought up a good point though because you talked about the medical field. So let's talk about ethics. So in AI, while we have a few minutes, so there's a lot of hospitals and medical facilities that do rely on AI to help diagnose and provide a suggested treatment regimen,
Yeah.
right? And the last thing you want is the AI to say, well, not worth it, euthanize. Um, last thing, that's the last thing you want.
Yeah.
Um, but now we need to teach. How do we really enforce ethics with an AI? Like, how can we ensure that the AI is never going to say, you know what, this person's just a lost cause?
Yeah. So it really depends on what you use the AI for. So I think that's what it comes down to, because I think when a hospital is justified to whatever oversight board it has to report to, saying, "Hey, we use AI to um, recommend patient care," there's going to be like multiple issues with that. Hospitals have been sued for this. So, kind of where I see on hospitals try to use AI more is not really so much on recommending patient care, because they want that to be in the hands of human doctors. Because I don't want to sound cynical, but at least doctors are protected by malpractice insurance if something goes wrong. If you're using an AI to kind of decide who gets to when to like pull a life support or something like that, that's not an outcome that even patients are comfortable with, and they may in the long term like avoid your institution. So from an ethical standpoint, what do you do? Like, where do you kind of deploy machine learning into like a healthcare setting? A lot of examples I'm seeing are less glamorous, but still important. Like, how do you schedule the replenishment of medical inventory at a hospital? Like, are we running out of surgical gloves? Are we running out of these specialized tubes? And how do we kind of predict during like a flu season, like will we need more of a certain kind of medicine or product? That's like a relatively safe way to apply it, and it's ethically sound. Something slightly more on the line, but still it can be done ethically, is like how can you use AI or use machine learning to automate the scheduling of hospital beds for like these discretionary procedures? Like somebody comes in and they need like surgery to, I don't know, heal up their knee. It's not life threatening, but they've scheduled surgery. But we want to make sure that there are enough beds in reserve so that if somebody does come in with an emergency, or if we're predicting like a flu season or um, a large infectious disease outbreak, can we still have a reserve of beds for emergencies without actually losing money by not having enough surgeries or procedures scheduled? So here's a way that machine learning could help. There's have been examples of this being demonstrated, but at the end of the day, like if you want to be really risk averse and you want to um, make sure you're not accused of any ethical breaches, maybe you take that recommendation from the machine learning algo and just say, you know what, I'm going to be more conservative with this and still keep a few more beds in reserve. So it's really a human component of how you take the AI's recommendation, rather than just saying AI is good versus AI is bad.
I think that a really good use in the medical field, for AI is the use of being able to read certain types of scans that the CAT scans, MRIs, and all
Mhm.
that. And because maybe they can detect something that the doctor missed
Yeah.
or the technician missed, and then be able to say, okay, hey, we've detected this. But I also think on top of that that it should be double checked. Because what if the AI misread something?
Mhm.
It's not like every CAT scan or MRI is perfect. But if there's enough there for the AI to work with, or even X-rays, there's a fracture that the doctor can't see, but the AI can detect it.
Mhm.
And then the doctor can then make decisions on how to treat that patient. What do we need to do? Do we need to put your arm in a sling for a little while? We need to amputate. What? But
Yeah.
but the idea is that and I think the theme of the entire conversation is really that no, AI and humans are not enough by themselves. They have to work together. And that's the and that's just the way that things are going. More businesses are using AI to get things done. And there's also a lot of thoughts about people, being concerned about AI is going to take over their job, and stuff like that. And while I can understand that that is a valid concern, I don't think that there are some things that can be automated by AI that some that people have a job function to do. But I think overall, people's jobs are going to be pretty safe. What do you think?
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head. Because it's really about AI is really good at task automation, but not wholesale job automation. Because if you think about it, most jobs, whether you're a radiologist, doctor, lawyer, systems engineer, your job consists of many different tasks. And if you make a list of all the tasks in your job, you can kind of say, okay, which of these tasks is easily automatable, which of these tasks is not automatable. And if you're interested in like career progression, you can kind of figure out how do I move laterally into a different like area, or maybe even change a function based on the knowledge I have, where most of the work I'm doing is very hard to automate. So skills like solving um, critical problems, they involve a lot of critical thinking based on incomplete information. Even the best AI systems are not very good at that or very accurate because there's a lot of judgment involved. You have to go talk to people and get like offline feedback. So things like persuading people, whether it's your boss, your colleagues, your um, your the employees that you manage, or even your customers, that kind of storytelling persuasion, extremely hard to automate. And we can keep going down the list, like building relationships, building trust. Those jobs are hard to automate. People say, "Oh, we're going to automate software engineers." I'm like, "No, you're not going to do that because a lot of the work software engineers do is work with other engineers. They're like kind of collaborating on the same like kind of software to build. They're trying to test bugs. They're working with end users, business users, customers, getting feedback. So a lot of that stuff is cannot be done by an AI agent. Um, but anybody that's concerned about automation, I mean, my general advice to them is if you're if every task in your job or most of the tasks in your job are logical, routine, and repetitive, where it's the rules for performing the task are programmable. Like if you spend your entire morning moving a column from one spreadsheet to another spreadsheet, then I would worry a little bit. But if you're doing this kind of well-rounded work that involves really dealing with people, or building complex, elegant solutions, then you're going to be fine.
Well, we're running out of time here, so I just want to give you the floor for just another minute or two, and just to get your final thoughts on AI, the future of AI, and all that, and also AI in enterprises and in our personal lives. Just
Yeah,
any
I'm gonna
thoughts.
Yeah, I'm going to start with personal life. Like, guys, if you haven't played with ChatGPT, Midjourney, Generative AI, Copilot, please play with it. Like, it's a massive, massive time saver. I can say that I use this for my job as a consultant, and I literally save 5 hours a week. It's not doing the work for me, but it's helping me distill long bits of information into understandable chunks where I can kind of figure out what do I want to focus my time. So please experiment. A lot of these tools are free. Go for it. Organizationally, we're seeing a lot more prototyping in terms of AI, where there's suddenly there's more like budget for this kind of thing than there was like 5 years ago because there was no chat GPT 5 years ago. So we're seeing a lot of companies building. If your company is building, that's great. If your company's not building, you want to be part of it, just make a suggestion. Get in on that project team. There's a lot of area for opportunity because most companies they're not going to adopt something just because it came in the news. There's going to be a slow, steady process. So we're well into that steady process of experimentation, isolated use cases, and eventually a large scale kind of adoption with an AI system. So what does the future look like? I still think in my lifetime, at least in my career, it's going to be human plus AI. AI is good at certain things, applying massive amount of computing power to a specific task, but humans are good at something else entirely different, applying arguably limited computing power to a broad range of tasks. So when you combine our ability to do a large number of things very well with AI's ability to do a specific task very well, that's really the best of both worlds. And any smart organization will use AI to augment the work that their people are doing instead of automate or replace the people that are at the firm.
Excellent. Well, I definitely want to thank you for your time, Raj, today to appear on the show today. And folks out there, please follow Raj on LinkedIn and any other social media. We will definitely provide that for you in the comments below. And if you guys have any questions for either of us, we're always available, so feel free. And with that, I'd like to say thank you and have a good rest of your day. Thank you.
Thank you, Steve. This has been a pleasure.